In the story of early America, some voices are recorded, they're remembered, but there are others, voices just as powerful, that were systematically silenced, almost erased from the historical record. This is the story of one of those voices. You know, decades before Frederick Douglass delivered this powerful indictment, another man was navigating that exact same paradox, not just with words of protest, but with his very presence. This was the fundamental contradiction at the nation's founding. And in this landscape, this place of profound tension, new movements of faith were also beginning to take root, and they were challenging the old order. It's right there at the intersection of this political revolution and this religious revival that we find a figure who seems almost impossible for his time, a complete structural anomaly.
Harry Hoosier was born into slavery, we think around 1750. Now, as the nation is fighting for its own freedom, the Methodist faith is spreading like wildfire, and it's then that Hoosier begins this incredible journey alongside one of its most prominent leaders, Francis Asbury.
And this is the core puzzle of his life. How could an illiterate black man, who was presumed to be enslaved for much of his life, command the attention of both black and white audiences in a society that was built on a brutally strict racial hierarchy?
His name was Harry Hoosier, and we're going to examine how this man, a man the law refused to even see, became a man that thousands of people traveled for miles just to hear.
So how did he do it? Well, the source of his power was a paradox that baffled even the most educated people of his day.
The hard facts of his life, they're pretty sparse. We know he was born into slavery and that he gained this really rare freedom of movement as a circuit rider, traveling with Bishop Asbury. Now, even though he couldn't read or write, his mind was like a library. He had memorized vast portions of the Bible and entire hymn books, a feat of memory that became the very foundation of his ministry.
And this right here, this illustrates the central tension of his gift. He was, by all the standards of the day, uneducated, and yet his reputation for powerful oratory was simply unmatched. With his voice alone, he was dismantling the entire argument of racial inferiority.
I mean, think about this. A signer of the Declaration of Independence, Dr. Benjamin Rush, heard Hoosier preach and declared him the nation's greatest speaker. This wasn't just some offhand compliment. It was a recognition of a kind of genius that defied every single social and racial convention of the time.
And this power, this oratorical gift, it wasn't just an abstract skill. It had a profound, visible impact on the landscape of American religion. In 1784, he made history. What happened at Thomas Chapel was completely unprecedented. This wasn't a secondary sermon to a segregated group in the back. This was a black man taking the pulpit as the primary spiritual authority for a white congregation. And from there, his fame just exploded. Soon, Harry Hoosier wasn't just the man who spoke after the main preacher, he became the main event. Contemporary accounts describe his crowd swelling to over 1,000 people, often outdrawing the very same celebrated white preachers he traveled with.
So what Hoosier created in these revival meetings was this temporary radical space. Look, it wasn't legal equality, it wasn't social equality. But for the length of a sermon, the rules of the outside world were suspended. Spiritual authority, not skin color, was what mattered.
This immense popularity, it leads us to the most famous and certainly the most debated part of his legacy, his name.
Could the entire state of Indiana, the Hoosier state, actually be named after this groundbreaking black preacher? It's a question that has fascinated historians for well over a century.
So the theory goes something like this. The term Hoosiers was first used as a kind of slur for the rustic, uneducated followers of this illiterate black preacher. As his converts migrated west, the name just stuck to the settlers of the new state of Indiana. It's a compelling story, but the counterpoints are significant. Harry Hoosier himself never actually preached in Indiana, and there are other very plausible origins for the word. So, historians are clear, the evidence is purely circumstantial. There is absolutely no definitive proof. And you can see in this 1839 caricature how the term Hoosier became associated with these rough, uncultured frontiersmen. Now, whether that image connects back to Harry Hoosier's followers or to another origin, like the Cumberland term Hoosier for a hill person, that remains a subject of intense historical debate.
But regardless of where the nickname came from, there's a much more profound question that remains about his legacy.
Why did the greatest orator in America nearly vanish from our history books? The answer, it turns out, lies not in what he did, but in what was never written down.
Just consider the archival record.
There are no paintings of him that survive. Because he was illiterate, he left no letters, no diaries, no written sermons. Everything we know about him is filtered through the pens of the white men he traveled with. This silence in the archives isn't proof that he wasn't important. It's proof of a system that didn't value the lives of black figures enough to record them.
This painting, The Jolly Flatboatman, is a perfect metaphor. It captures the life of the era, the movement of people. But the individuals are completely anonymous. Just like the figures in so many works from the period, Harry Hoosier was present, he was influential, he was essential to the scene, yet his individual identity was rarely seen as worthy of preservation.
So, what is his ultimate legacy? It's structural. He was one of the very first nationally recognized black evangelists. He was a critical engine for the growth of Methodism. He proved that a black man could hold profound spiritual authority even when he was denied all civil authority. And in doing so, he paved the way for the great independent black churches that would become the cornerstones of the community.
You have to remember, before black pulpits became institutions in their own right, Harry Hoosier stood in borrowed spaces, and he commanded them.